Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is another Fateless video, and today we're going to be exploring the top things you need to do when you're designing an RPG game. So at Fateless, our first game is going to be a role-playing hero collector RPG, and what we're looking at now for our game design is some of the key things that we need to put into our game. What makes a really great RPG? You know, all those RPG games that you've played in the past, what kind of brings them together? And there's a few things. Firstly, storyline. And it's actually one of the most important things that we're going to have to tackle. I'll get into that in a second. Next thing is the characters you use or collect or face. They need to be really engaging. Again, we'll tackle that. The locations that you put these characters in. Do they fit the IP really well? Do they fit the storyline that you're trying to tell? The soundtrack that you put against these champions as well. And then lastly, the combat system that you put into your game. All 5 of those elements have to be absolutely nailed to create a great RPG game. So let's kick off then with storyline, and why is it so important in an RPG game? I think it actually comes back to the foundations of what an RPG was built on, and a lot of that was built around the early D&D tabletop type environment. And the reason why that's so important to come back to is because D&D really was storytelling with your imagination, and it's very hard to capture someone's imagination within a game. Yeah, an imagination can be ever turning. You get twists and turns. Depends how good your dungeon master is in terms of the quality of the content of game you're going to face. You then start to think about some kind of novels that have been either made into film or games, and realize that the best ones have come from great stories. If we look at the Lord of the Rings kind of saga, the films that were produced from Lord of the Rings are actually top tier. You know, if you think about the key characters and their storytelling, characters like Gandalf, moving from Gandalf the Grey, fighting the Balrog, thinking that he's dead, and how that made you feel, and then actually him coming back as Gandalf the White. Like, all of these different plot twists along the way just re-energized you about the story and the direction it's going to take. That's no different within games. If an RPG cannot hold you for 30, 40 hours of gameplay, then in today's society, actually, we're going to struggle to create a game which is strong enough. This is actually one of the reasons why Fateless are going to be working with a top tier IP. There's already a rich amount of lore and storytelling that we can draw from the universe that the IP has already created. Which means actually what we'll be doing is we'll be tapping into, I guess, memories of our own from playing these games in their original forms or reading the source material when it first came out, and utilizing that within our game content. If I think about another game which really kind of held me for a number of years, World of Warcraft, one of the things I actually used to love to do from time to time was watch cinematic into cinematic and actually look at a lot of the lore that went in between those. And I was like fully wrapped up in the story behind the new expansions, or you know, the new game modes that came out with World of Warcraft. When you see the Burning Crusade coming through, you got Illidan coming in, you are not prepared, and you kind of got the big portal, and you start doing some research in the background. It really is engaging. You want to get to that boss, you want to fight that boss. And I do think that a lot of games in this kind of hero collector genre at the moment, they do the collection part pretty well, and in fact they kind of got some really interesting characters with different designs and what have you. They struggle to bring the story along with it, or engage people in a way that they want to learn the story. So definitely one of the reasons why we're picking IP is to bring some of that story to the table, make there be a genuine reason for you to want to collect a character or to defeat the enemy. Let's move on to talk about characters, character collection. I mean, I've been collecting things since I was very young. And I think back to kind of like Magic the Gathering, going down my local market, buying a couple of packs with a pal of mine, coming back, seeing what we got to bolster our collections. And really that kind of, I guess, carried on for me throughout my whole life in different guises. And it's now kind of come through in gaming. So hero collectors for me hold like a real place in my heart. I really enjoy the different kind of characters that are coming through. I enjoy seeing their different abilities. And I guess, you know, I think back to Final Fantasy VII and the different abilities you collect. Okay, you're not necessarily collecting different heroes all the time, but you are collecting different ways to attack your enemies and, I guess, to wreak havoc. And it's no different really. The hero collectors are just a different form of that, which have just kind of like evolved over time. So what we want to make sure at Fateless, definitely for our first title, that we've got this great depth of characters. Yeah, deep is one of our kind of like key metrics in terms of what we're going to be designing. We want to make sure that you can equip those different characters with a great selection of valuable items. Because again, you've got collection of characters, you've also got collection of things which make your characters cool. Yeah, and that kind of like feeling of, yes, I just grabbed something which I really wanted is so important in an RPG. And that kind of comes in as well in terms of having different factions and different kind of like elements within your game. So, you know, whether it's looking at dwarves, elves, orcs, magicians, you know, different types of characters, and the way that they have their own feel to them, their own way that they will do damage, their own way that they will engage with enemies. All of these things give you a good diversity within an RPG, which we absolutely will need to bring into our game. So I think for the next two areas I'm going to talk about here, locations and soundtrack, you can almost pull those together. So it's the environment that you're in, and then the overlay of sound actually makes such a difference. You know when you're coming to a big boss fight in a cool RPG. Yeah, and you know when that boss is leveling up because of the sound that you hear in the background. And those are the type of things which those kind of like fine touches can make the difference between a good game and a brilliant game. Let's focus on locations. In RPG games, it's so important to have that variation of location. If you think about a kind of dwarven mountain type of environment where it's quite dark, it feels kind of almost dim, undervalued as an area. Yeah, very, very harsh environment to be in. If you compare that to, I don't know, going into like an elvish environment where it's much more kind of like forestry, open world, different type of feel to it, different type of lighting that you get in those locations. I mean, actually, a kind of book turn series which did this really well, I think, was Game of Thrones. Instantly, when you switch from scene to scene, you knew when you were going from, I don't know, talking to the wolves, yeah, in the north. You knew when you were in the north and it was this kind of like harsh land, wet, cold, miserable. Then you go across the narrow sea, and again, you just instantly know the different environments that you're in. So location was actually selling part of the story, selling part of the experience to us as viewers. We need to do exactly the same thing in game, and the location complements the soundtrack, which complements the storytelling. So the last thing then to tackle in game design for us is going to be battle system. And look, we know we're going to be doing a turn-based RPG. We know that. And we know there's a number of these that already exist. So what do we need to be doing? We need to give you a feeling of, okay, you're going to be doing the same action again and again. How do we make sure that that still feels exciting to you? Part of that is with the addition of new characters that you collect and their different animations, their different abilities, their different spells. Part of that is as you level up characters, do they gain something different for you to see, to do? Part of that is for you to go into new boss locations, new environments, and have to kind of use your brain to kind of utilize this battle system to your benefit. And also, I think part of it is in terms of how we design different elements of the game. So although it's always going to be a turn-based RPG, how does that play out when you're in a campaign type of setting where you're going through a number of dungeons which are predetermined versus a PvP environment, versus a whole kind of like clan versus clan, either war or boss environment? And I think what you need to do there is to make sure that there's enough variety to keep it interesting without completely confusing the player. So one of the things we've already kind of spoken about here is, you know, in terms of introducing something new and fresh, almost like the wandering monster type of mechanic or event type boss, which comes out almost like as a world boss, and it's a different experience from what you've seen before, and it's exciting and it's fresh, and you don't yet know the mechanics, and the rest of the people playing the game don't yet know the mechanics. That's one interesting way to do it. Another thing that we've been talking about, certainly in kind of like Clan Wars or PvP, is to have a system where you're actually selecting either your opponent or you're selecting the components of your team in the moment. And it might mean that you can unlock characters that you don't actually own yet to play this particular environment, to have fun in a more balanced mode. So there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of play with that, but certainly the battle system is going to be essential in creating a great game. There you go, guys. 5 different things that we're factoring for Fateless, for our first title, to create a great turn-based RPG. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you later.